Hello, in this video we're going to talk about conditionals, which are an integral part of any sort of programming language. And conditionals are the thing in code that allows us to make a decision. And in early coding, you just program a couple commands and some print statements and whatnot, but you never made a decision. And if you think about when you interact with any sort of a device or any sort of a thing that has computer code in it, it almost always has to make a decision and then do one thing if the decision is true and another thing if it's false. Some of the words we're going to look at are conditional, if clause, condition, operators, and then block. So let's get right to it. A conditional, like I said, it decides something. It's really, in the programming world, it decides whether to skip a section of code or not. This graphic is a little bit helpful. So we really ask an if question. So if this is true, then we do one thing. If this is not true, then we do something else. So in the terms of the code, we might say if the age is greater than 27, so if that's true, then the computer will run a line of code that is specific to that factor. We might then say also if it's, well, by default, if it's not greater than 27, if age is not greater than 27, then the computer will run another line of code. So in this sort of if conditional, we're not adding any alternative. We're just asking, is this thing true? So I could say, if name equals Michael, then add Anderson. If not, then don't add Anderson and just do something else, or maybe even just end the program. So all we're looking at here in this conditional statement is if something is true. And if it's not true, the computer program just moves on. So the way this works in syntax is we have the yes or no question in a very specific manner. We type in the word if, then we have the condition. And again, the condition could be something like if age is greater than 27, if name does not equal Michael, if length of name is greater than 5. All sorts of things can be the condition. And if that condition is true, then we run a line of code. And if it's not true, we just skip the code. And remember, code is read left to right, top to bottom. So you would put an if conditional above other lines of code that would be the rest of your program if you wanted to do something considering a certain thing might be true. So here's some examples. You could say, is this variable equal to 0? And if it is equal to 0, then you'll run a line of code that's relative to that. If not, the program keeps going. And then if it is equal to 0, you'll run the line of code that's relevant to it being equal to 0, but then the program will still keep going. You could ask, are these values the same? So is this word equal to this word? And if it is, maybe you'll print a statement that'll say the words are the same, and then the computer will keep running the program. If these are not the same, then the computer will just keep running the program. It won't print up anything. Or you could say, is value 1 larger than value 2? And you would do the same decision. So we're going to code some of this out in just a minute, and we'll see how this all works. So here's some of the comparison operators that we're going to use. When we speak about things, we can say less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to, or just equal to or not equal to. Now, these are called comparison operators because we're comparing one thing to another. So essentially, these are going to give us yes or no answers. So you're going to say, is this number less than that number? So the answer is yes or no. Is this number greater than that number? Yes or no. Or is this word equal to or not equal to this other word? Then it'll answer yes or no. So either way, no matter which way we slice it in a comparison operator, we're going to get a yes or a no as our answer, which is technically called a Boolean, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Now, one of these operators that's really important to point out is the equal to or the equivalency operator, because in Python we use two equal signs. So if I want to say, is the number entered, is the integer entered equivalent to 30? Well, I wouldn't use one equal sign, I would use equal equal. The reason why is because using one equal sign is called an assignment operator. So we use an assignment operator when we want to say age equals 30. So we're saying we're assigning a variable to a value. So that's what one equal sign does. In coding in Python, two equal signs are necessary to ask an equivalency. And that's really, really important because most people remember, in math, one equal sign is all we ever use. In coding, it's different. In JavaScript, they use three equal signs. And so you have to remember that if you program in that language. Now, to ask if something is not equal to another value, you do the exclamation point with an equal sign. And that's how you would say, is the number entered not equal to 30 or whatever that is. So this is really important, this syntax, and this is probably something that you might make an error on, but it's something to remember that you're likely to make an error on this. And so when you do, you'll know exactly where to look and you'll realize, I need to have two equal signs because I'm testing if these things are equivalent. And then in a conditional, the last part we have in this statement is called the then block. And it's the code that might be skipped if the condition is not true. So if the condition is true, this code is not skipped. So it's nested underneath the if conditional. So you have the if condition, then you have the then block code, which again, if the condition is true, the then block code runs. If the condition is false, this part of the code does not run. And this is where we have an important syntax as well, where we indent. In most editors, the indentation is automatic. It will, but when you hit enter after you do an if conditional and a colon, and you hit enter, the cursor will automatically indent. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you're going to add a condition ad hoc, but you have to remember to indent. This is another place where you're probably going to get an error because you're going to forget some indentation sometimes, or you might even indent too much because these are very, very specific how far an if conditional is indented. Now, one simple thing to remember is that on really every editor, if you're on the line just below the if you just click the tab button one time, that will indent you exactly where you need to be. So if it's hard to figure out where exactly you have to indent, you just go underneath the I and if and then hit tab and you're going to get right there. So this is a very simplified view of this right here. We're going to look at the code editor just for a minute, code a couple of these things out so we have a better idea of how this works. So we're over here at the code editor, and this is also lesson 2.1, conditionals instruction number 1. So if you need to get that completed, this code will walk you through what to do. So we're going to set this up real quick. We're going to add a variable. We'll call it num equals integer input, and then we'll just say enter and integer, kind of like the warm up. And we'll give some spaces, make sure that we do our double parentheses to close it out. And then we're going to multiply that number times 3. So number times equals 3. So that number is whatever is put in, that integer is going to be multiplied by 3. And then let's just go ahead and do a print statement. So we'll say print the integer tripled is, and then we'll do a space and a quote and then a plus, and then we need to typecast to a string, that num, and double parentheses to close that out. And let's go ahead and run this just to make sure we're in good shape. So I'm going to pause this and run. You do the same thing, and as long as there's no errors, we're going to keep on going. And I'm glad I did test mine because mine ended up being wrong because I did a plus instead of a times. And so that's why you always want to test often, because sometimes you're going to make little errors. So now mine's right. Hopefully yours is right as well. So now let's add an if conditional. What we're going to do is we're going to test to see if the number is greater than 27. And then if it is, we're going to print out a statement. And if it's not, then we won't do anything. So we're going to go if, that's how we start the if conditional, and we're not ever indenting, we're not indenting at this point with the if. That's right there on the left side. So if space, and then we're going to do the condition. So with the evaluation we're going to ask is if num is greater than 27, and then a colon. So this is really, really important. This condition, this is where we're doing the condition. We're asking if number, the integer here, is greater than 27, and then we do a colon. Now I'm just going to hit enter, and notice how I'm indented. It's vital that I'm indented. Now if by chance I messed up and my cursor was over here, all I have to do is hit tab, and I get exactly to where I want to be. But you must be indented. If you're not, it's just not going to work, and you're going to get an error, and you're going to wonder why. So now if number is greater than 27, we're going to print out a statement. So we'll type in print and we'll say you entered a number that is not a single digit, like this, because any number greater than 9 would be greater than 27, and 9 is multiplied by 3 is 27, so that would be a true statement. So now we can test this and see what happens if we enter whatever number. So let's go ahead and test that out. Okay, so enter an integer. I'm going to enter 3. That's a single digit number. And all it says is the integer tripled is 9. Well, let's enter 9. So let's go back here. Let's enter 9. Again, this is a single digit number. And the integer tripled is 27. So now let's enter a bigger number, a 2-digit number. Let's say 31. And I get the integer tripled is 93. And then I get the statement, you entered a number that is not a single digit. And the reason why I got this is because the evaluation, if number is greater than 27, was true, because 31 tripled is greater than 27. So then the print statement ran because of that. In the prior two examples where we did 3 and 9, that print statement was skipped because the evaluation, number greater than 27, was not true. Now there's no other code to do here, but let me add one extra line of code just so I can show how that works. So I'm going to go down to line 12, and I'm going to, actually, let's go to line 11, and I'm just going to do a blank line. And then on line 12, I'm just going to say print, and then thanks for playing my age game, like that. So it's just a statement that I'm going to show after we're done. So now let's go ahead and run a 1-digit number and a 2-digit number and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to enter a 1-digit number. We'll do 8. And it says the integer tripled is 24. Thanks for playing my age game. So it does this last print statement, but it doesn't do the other one because 24 is less than 27. So now let's do a double-digit number and see what happens. So here I'll just enter a 16. And here it says the integer tripled is 48. And then it does say you entered a number that is not a single digit. And then it says thanks for playing my age game. So either way, this rest of the code runs. The if conditional basically evaluates a condition, and if it's true, it makes a statement or it does something. In this case, it prints this out. And if it's not true, it continues on. Whether it's true or not, the program continues on. So as long as you got yours to work, even without this last little part, you did a good job, and you can go ahead and turn this in.